It's time for Retraction. I'm Antoine.
I'm Jamie, and we are reversing Course Through Discourse. And before we get started, subscribe, like, share, and comment on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter, and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and more.
That's important. It is the Thanksgiving episode. So happy gobble gobble to all you listeners out there. And it is also, drum roll, please.
That's your own drum roll. You were kind of doing it. You're like a one-man band. Go. You're like the guy in the square with he kicks and it hits a drum and he's got cymbals.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's
exactly like a whole one-man band. So yeah.
It is National Native American Heritage Month. So there's that. It's a whole month dedicated to the indigenous populations of America, and that's fantastic. Why does everyone have to be divvied up into little months? I don't know. It'd be interesting if we did that for European history. If we just said it's March, it's European. I know March probably belongs to something, but it's March, it's European History Month, and you don't teach European history outside of March ever. You don't touch it. You don't see any movies about it. You don't do anything with it.
Be interesting
outside of March. It's the only time you talk about European history, and then you talk about American history in May, and then you just keep cycling out. That's how the school curriculum should be done. I wonder if anyone would agree with that. Listeners, you let us know.
It's an interesting way to approach it because you're absolutely right. Where you have months where you're shoehorning in certain things. And then it's like everywhere else, every other day of the year, you're learning about either American colonialism or European history.
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And not properly usually. But I digress. Anyway, so I do have a topic related to our indigenous people because that's what we like to do. That's our annual endeavor every year. If you come and listen to this pod, we like to cover something that is going on in the world of our First Peoples. And what is happening this year is another drum roll. No, that's too much. That'll be annoying. That's that stick. House panel weighs whether to seat a Cherokee delegate in Congress, says the New York Times. That is an article that the hearing held by House Rules Committee was part of a push to allow Kim Teehee. I really apologize if that is not the pronunciation of that name. You can take a stab at that, Jamie. It's Teehee. What do you think?
I don't want to guess. Teehee.
Teehee? It could be Teehee. It could be something.
Yeah.
Okay. A veteran policy aide and longtime Cherokee Nation official to be seated in the coming months as a non-voting delegate in the House, which would add the first delegate from a tribal nation ever to serve.
Why just Cherokee? They have the largest numbers that would warrant representation?
Yeah, well, hold on to your seats. Hold on to your pants. You're about to get a history.
If you only remember Jurassic Park, you could have simply said, hold on to your butts. But apparently you don't remember that quote, that very famous quote.
You like to remind me of it, and I like to stick it in the back of my mind every single time. If it is granted, that's such a weird New York Times. I think you need to, if it granted the position to Miss Teehee, 54, the House would fulfill a once overlooked stipulation in the Treaty of New Echota. Again, not sure if that's the pronunciation, which forced the nation to relinquish its ancestral lands in the South. The treaty led the U.S. government to force 16,000 members of the Cherokee Nation on the Trail of Tears. I think most Americans know the Trail of Tears. That's usually covered in our elementary history books. It
gets a page or two.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it gets a unit, right? It gets like a 2-week or 1-week unit, lumped in with all the other atrocities for the First Peoples. A deadly trek to land in what is now Oklahoma. A quarter of those forced to leave, about 4,000, died before they arrived as a result of harsh conditions, starvation, and disease. Now, I actually have the treaty right here, which I think is interesting and important to read. Part of the treaty, it is Article 7. It reads, the Cherokee Nation, having already made great progress in civilization and deeming it important that every proper and laudable inducement should be offered to their people to improve their condition, as well as to guard and secure in the most effectual manner the rights guaranteed to them in this treaty, and with a view to illustrate the liberal and enlarged policy of the government of the United States toward the Indians in their removal beyond the territorial limits of the states, comma, it is stipulated that they shall be entitled to a delegate in the House of Representatives of the United States whenever Congress shall make provision for the same. That last part is I don't really.
So break it down. Break it down first. Sure. Translate that for the layman. What is all that?
We are going to take your land. We are going to move you beyond the borders of the United States of America, and in recompense for doing so, you will be afforded a non-voting seat in our Congress to voice your grievances. That is what that article. That's what Article 7 is essentially saying.
And when was that written?
1836. Okay. So yes, it was ratified by Andrew Jackson, one of the more hated presidents of the United States, and I think he was almost impeached. I believe that, or he was impeached, one of the two, because of his. This wasn't because of it, but he had a horrible representation for being a Class A racist and otherwise a non-lover of the indigenous peoples. Which is why it's no surprise that the treaty was never ratified, or that they were never given the seat in Congress, despite the fact that it was clearly outlined and clearly earmarked in a treaty that they were forced to sign by gunpoint. So, going on,
a non-voting position.
Yes, which we have. We already have that. DC has non-voting. There's a couple of people who have non-voting. Guam, any basically territories have non-voting.
So what do they?
So what do they do? Precedent.
What are they
voting seats? You get to voice. You get to join committees, and so you can still shape legislation. You have a voice at the table, so you can voice grievances. You could air them, but you just can't vote anything into law.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just look. I mean, we're going to get into that because I definitely have strong feelings about that. I'm just going to finish this up, and then we can talk. We could go back and forth on that because I do have.
I mean, you say like it's almost better than nothing, and I would almost say it's it's probably worse than nothing because it pacifies you. It allows you to say this is how far you've come, but no further. Whereas if you never even got there, you wouldn't stop fighting.
Well, I think that the members of the Cherokee Nation who are fighting to get this ceremonial seat would beg to differ. And I do agree with them. I think that having nothing at all is what they've had for the past 200 years. So that's why this is momentous. I wouldn't relegate them back to nothingness.
No, I think that they should have a say.
More. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I will get into that because there are reasons for why they're basically not going that far. But let me just finish this piece here. By the way, you should check out. There's much more to the article in the New York Times. So listeners, definitely check it out. The article continues to say the final outcome being the seat. Oh, no, sorry. This is the representative. She's talking now. She says, it can be pretty overwhelming to think about when I think about what was bargained for and what was lost as a result of that particular treaty right, Ms. Teehee said in an interview before the hearing. I think about my family's history, the poverty, the loss of life, all the struggles that occurred as a result of that forced removal. The final outcome being the seating of the actual delegate in the House would give some small measure of justice for those, including my own ancestors, who lost their lives during that forced march, she added. Now this is the Representative Jim McGovern talking. As I study this issue, I believe is the right thing to do. It's the moral thing to do, said Representative Jim McGovern. He's a Democrat of Massachusetts and the chairman of the House Rules Committee. He said he believed there was a bipartisan support to allow for the seating of the delegate, even with Republicans set to take control of the House in January. As a final note, should Ms. Teehee be seated, she would join the ranks of a half dozen delegates, including District of Columbia, Guam, Virgin Islands, who are able to introduce legislation. This is answering your question a little bit more, Jamie. They can introduce legislation and sit on committees, but cannot vote on the House floor. Ms. Teehee said she would not pursue the right to a floor vote, in part because of concern about dual representation for Cherokee citizens already represented by lawmakers in whose districts they reside. Ms. Teehee was named to the post by Chuck Hoskin Jr., the principal chief of the Cherokee Nation, in August of 2019, and was confirmed unanimously by the Cherokee Nation Tribal Council. That is what's going on. That's the latest.
What is I'm sorry. What is the threat with giving a territory or a district, or in this case, a nation, voting power? What is
None.
it?
As far as I'm concerned, none. In fact, I think it's the least that we can do in terms of some sort of not reprisal. What's that word? What do we always talk about with slavery?
Reparation.
Reparations. Thank you. I think it's the least we can do in terms of reparations. I think that it is so cynical to begrudge them voting rights out of some semblance to our national state in terms of the integrity that they can have dual votes. I think that's insane because there's such a small percentage of the population. Exactly.
Well, but what's it like Guam? I could see the logic being, well, they got no skin in the game, right? They're not continental. They're not part of this landmass, but the Native Americans live here.
And they found it. I mean, they were here. That's my point. They were here.
Well, even like District of Columbia, that that's crazy.
Yeah, but that's still a manufactured state. I mean, that's a manufactured area. These are people who lived in this country well before the Westerners came. And
I agree. I don't understand. Yeah. Like I could see if there's I don't agree with it, but I could see at least the facade of an argument to say, well, they're not really of this nation. They're just a territory. They, whatever. I don't know. It's not right, but I could see that being made. But how do you extend that to someone or a group like Native Americans? Like, I just don't understand.
I think it's completely different. You're absolutely right.
Are you worried about sabotage, or that they don't have the country's? They're not loyal to the country. They don't have the best intentions for the country. Like, what? Why wouldn't you give them the right to vote? What is?
I mean, yeah. I think all that could be debunked easily with the number of Native Americans who served within the government.
Is it some absurd wars? Is it some absurd technicality that no one rectified? Like, what is it?
Well, I think that it's already absurd that you have to have a House committee to basically the part of the dithering of the committee is they're discussing whether that this treaty still has legal standing, which I find absurd because
how can you be part of the council and not a master?
A master of the council?
Oh, come on. Prequels, Star Wars.
Was that said?
Anakin Skywalker.
Is that what he says?
Yes.
Okay.
Man.
I couldn't get beyond sand. His love of sand, that whole sand dialogue in terms of love and relationships. I was like, all right, George Lucas can't write.
No, when they let him sit on the Jedi Council, but they don't grant status of master.
Right. Yeah. Cool. So like that, but not like that at all. Yeah. I think that first of all, I think part of it would also help our republic personally. I believe that if we were not only to grant rights to the Cherokee Nation, but to grant rights to all currently existing indigenous nations that reside within the United States, I think that could help shake up our dichotomy between red and blue. I think it could add something that lifeblood that I think is desperately needed to American politics, where you have people who are basically elected by their nations sitting in our representative government that are not aligned to any particular party. And if they happen to, it'd be by coincidence if they just happen to fall in line with either the blue or the red in particular proceedings or voting. But it wouldn't necessarily be mandate. Like, it wouldn't be necessary. You wouldn't need that in order to preside for your people or to represent your people. I think that, and maybe this is me being very naive and innocent about it. I don't know if it could be co-opted where within the Cherokee Nation, two people running happen to be one Republican, one Democrat, and whoever wins, that very well could happen.
Oh God, no. I do not want to.
You'd hope not.
Force them into parties.
Exactly. It's not about, you'd hope that wouldn't happen, but at least in the interim, at least in the early days, you would hope that it would be basically an influx of independent thought within the Congress that is really just about looking after the needs of the nation, whether it be historical misgivings or what to do in terms of the future of reservations in those territories and how they're treated in the U.S. government. The dual thing, I think, is a very easy thing to solve as well, because I had more time to think about it because that is my story.
What's the dual? What do you mean dual? Sorry.
Well, she basically brings up to say that the reason she doesn't want to force a voting issue is because she knows she doesn't want the pushback from basically dissenters saying that it's a double vote where she gets to vote once as a member of the Cherokee Nation, but then whatever representative who has that district is also supposedly voting with the interest of their constituents. And if the majority of those constituents happen to be Cherokee, that could essentially give you two votes on the council. So I think that's bunk. Or at least I think that what you could do is every voter who is of Cherokee descent could vote as either binary. They could vote as either a member of the Cherokee Nation, or they could vote as a member of their particular
Aren't there? I don't get it. Aren't there lines drawn? Like
yes, but this would supersede those lines. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, but I'm saying that you just carve out the Cherokee Nation, and if you decide to live outside of that,
no, because you wouldn't want to do that, because the you would. It's not about where the Cherokee Nation happens to reside currently today. It's about members.
So you can live anywhere. You're like borderless.
I believe that you should be allowed to do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so then
it's about your heritage and that's what this treaty is allowing. That's what the treaty is speaking to. It's not speaking to Cherokee people who live in one particular place. It's speaking to people descendants of the Cherokee Nation in general. It doesn't say they have to be in one place at all.
But are they?
I don't know if that's. I don't know.
Because if they were spread nationally, and I'm not going to say equally, but if they were spread out, then it would be like a moot point. Like, yeah, so any representative, every representative with Cherokee Nation people in there that they would also have to consider. But if they did all consolidate into one district or something like that, I kind of get it. But also, consider it compensation. For years of misrepresentation.
It could be. I'm just saying that I feel like there is a mediated way out of that particular hole. I don't think it needs to be something that's just shoved down everyone's throat to say they get a double vote because of how oppressed and disgusting the way that the government has treated them. I mean, in the beginning days, that's fine, but then like 100, 200 years from now, once it's a little bit.
What I was going to ask you is
established. I don't know how people will feel about that.
What I was going to ask, and I don't know if it's discussed or if you have opinions on it, but doing it this way at all, giving them their own representation in this way, does it almost solidify like a silo? Will it, to your point, 100 years from now, will it always be that the Cherokee Nation is separated from the rest of the states?
Well, I think that if you've existed this long and you still feel slightly separated, like you've existed in a separate state this
there's no other solution to there's no other I'm asking because I know I don't have much time to think about this. Is there any other solution that you can think of that would more integrate them but also fairly represent their interests?
I think the current system, I guess, the thing is, I don't know enough about who are the current representatives for the Cherokee Nation in terms of their districting. I don't know who they are. I don't know how representative that is. Clearly, again, this is the person who is being put up, Ms. Teehee, being put up as the representative of the Cherokee Nation. She herself is not forcing a voting position. So, I have to respect that. I'm only coming at it from, I think it would enrich our government were she afforded a voting position. But I'm not here to say that they need to take one. It's up to the Cherokee Nation. If this is not something that is particularly, that is important, it's not a deal breaker. I'm not. Who am I to say they should push for? I mean, I personally feel that all nations should be afforded this, and then we should also be looking at other wider groups and other ways to afford representation to people who might otherwise be gerrymandered, in one sense or another, based on historical grievances. I think that this is a perfect, thing to be taken as a case.
I mean, it's almost like we have the tool. We gerrymander for all the wrong reasons today.
Exactly.
We do it for the right reasons.
Exactly. Why can't we do it for the right reasons? Exactly. Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly part of it. So I think I think it's an important first step, and I hope it.
But it wouldn't work because you're saying that then you would be forcing them to coalesce in a few districts where it was gerrymandered. So that doesn't really work. So it's interesting that they would get special, or it would be on everyone's, and you just check it off whether or not it's
Yeah, I think you can do that. Yeah, exactly. I don't think that's a problem. I think that's we as a very industrialized nation should be able to figure that out for voting.
It should all be digital. You shouldn't be checking off anything.
Yeah, it should be digital.
Just be in the back end database.
Yeah, and everyone votes once anyway. So all that the voting fiasco nonsense that gets propagated around for particular party punditry points is ridiculous, and we know that's all but debunked by statistics. But I see no issue with it. That's what I'm saying. I see no issue with it. If someone does, we're more than open to hear your concerns and talk about them. But as far as I'm concerned, based on what I've read from the treaty itself, the government at the time decided that this was something that was not infringing upon the Republic and just didn't honor it. And I think that this honoring of this treaty needs to be honored before anyone could come into, because I feel like people could even make the argument to say that this treaty was written before past Ohio was part of the United States. They were given their own country, essentially. They were given their own area, removed from what was officially known as the United States. And I think that you should honor that treaty in times. It's like in step so it should come first, and then you can approach what you should like right now. We could say, okay, now they are in the United States. Now they get voting rights as well. But we should first honor this first part of the treaty as it would have been honored back then to give them a seat on the council without the voting rights. And then the next step is now you're in the United States. Here are your voting rights. That's how I think this should flow. To me, it's very cut and dry. I don't understand the dithering.
Well, there should be a road. It's not up to either of us or anyone else really to assume what's best for them and negotiate on their behalf. But I would assume that there should be a road to voting. I don't know what that road looks like, but that should be the vision. That should be the North Star.
Yeah, we agree. We agree.
I mean, that was the first thing I said. Like, I don't know why, why are they doing the voting thing? Like, it almost seems, I get that it's a step forward. So, I somewhat retract my knee-jerk reaction to the news, but I do feel like, this is either an attempt to do something because it's a confusing issue and they don't know what to do, or it's a pacification method to say, this is it. This is more than you have. And now that buys them decades of sufficient, if that's a word, it's spiced, where, you got something. Now we don't want to hear about it for a while.
Yeah.
I hope it's not that.
Me too. And in fact, I hope that they actually get that. I feel like this part needs to happen. And if the Republicans take over in January, or the Democrats fail to get this passed before they take over, it's just one more. If the Democrats can't get this done, to me, it's one more mark on how ineffective and fleckless the Democrats really are, and that people need to stop. We need to stop supporting them as the only alternative to some sort of Gestapo-esque fundamental takeover of the country, because that's not good enough. That's my point. That's just not good enough.
Well, going against the grain on the Democratic
Party.
It's
not.
How far you've fallen.
Yeah. Well, yes, you're right. I am a fallen angel. I am definitely stirring.
Used to be. I'll do what the party wants.
Used to be.
Good of the party.
This is correct. But now I've lived long enough to become the villain.
Now I've survived the pandemic.
Yeah.
I've had enough.
I'm living in a different world now, and these are different times. So,
well, it's interesting too,
if they don't get it done,
isn't there the big argument that Puerto Rico should have voting rights, and I'm assuming other territories as well?
That's about being a state. That's a much larger argument.
But it seems like still you're making a fundamental error by doing it this way too, where that there's an issue, and now you have newcomers into this arena, and you're just like, all right, we're just going to keep doing the same thing that we know we have an issue with. So that part there too.
I can see that. I mean, I feel like it's slightly different because
it's worse because they live in this country and we already broke their treaty. I actually think it's worse than that.
Yeah. No, I can see it that way. That's a good point. I actually can see it. It is worse. It is much worse because you're right. It's already a broken treaty. So it's the least we can do. The fact that this is up for debate and it's the least we can do is give them the non-voting seat, I think is ridiculous. And the fact that the blue party the progressive party is in control and actually debating to get some sort of bipartisanship to get this through. I just find, I mean, they probably have to, but it's just so ridiculous. It's just like, how progressive are you if this is something that isn't a lock? Like, this isn't something that, if I feel like a true progressive, this isn't even something up for debate. It's just, this is what we're going to do. We're going to honor the treaty. Here's a meeting to say who's on board with honoring this treaty, not even questioning the validity of the treaty. It's like, no, true progressives would just say, this was already written, set in stone. One of our most racist presidents in our history agreed to it. Therefore, we're going to do it. It's like, if he could do it, if he agreed to it, then why are we dithering? Because to dither means you're worse than Andrew Jackson. That's what the opposition should be coming at them with. That to not get this done means that the people currently on the board to vote for this in our Congress that are blue, that are saying they're progressives, are actually worse than Andrew Jackson himself, who would have actually allowed this to happen based on his wording, even though he didn't actually allow it to happen. But based on his wording, it makes you worse than Andrew Jackson. I would say that. So I'm going to go hard on it. Happy Thanksgiving,
Democrats.
gobble gobble. You guys got to get this done. Otherwise, it's like, come on. What are you here for? What is your point? What is the point of your existence?
All right, you heard it here, folks. Jacksonian Democrats.
Basically, it has a good ring to it too. I like it. What is it? If the shoe fits, there it is.
There it is. All right. Wow. Coming in hot.
Yep. Hot and heavy. What do you got?
Well, let's all take a breath because we're going to need it.
Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. So as Antoine had said in the beginning of the episode, last year for Thanksgiving on episode 54, we highlighted the influence of North America's indigenous peoples on the founding of the U.S. and its systems and principles. And I urge all of our viewers and listeners to check out that episode to learn more about how Native Americans really shaped the American ideals you all have come to know and love. This year, what I'm going to try and do is I want to continue giving thanks where thanks is due by highlighting contributions made by indigenous peoples. But this time I want to focus on how African indigenous knowledge helped shape modern medicine in the U.S. Okay. So the year is 1721 and smallpox is ravaging Boston. Eventually, half of the city's 11,000 inhabitants are infected and 850 lives lost. Now, many survived smallpox thanks to inoculation. Specifically for smallpox, inoculation is called variolation. Why variolation, you might ask? Well, smallpox is called the variola virus. For those of you that don't know, inoculation is a method of infecting individuals with small amounts of smallpox, pus, through cuts in the skin, and nasal inhalation. I'm going to be honest, the nasal inhalation bit was new to me. I was a little bit grossed out, and that's probably the last time you'll ever hear me say it.
Okay.
So for some history buffs or people who just remember random stuff, this story, smallpox Boston, might sound familiar. And you might say, if you're that savvy, hey, didn't Cotton Mather introduce inoculation to the colonies? Well, I'll let you be the judge. New England Puritan preacher that seemingly gave his support to the Salem witch trials was also a great promoter of inoculations. Mather was largely responsible for colonial adoption of inoculation, even in the face of fierce anti-vaxxers who, on a November day, maybe just like today, in 1721, threw a small bomb at him. And they often debated saying smallpox was God's will.
Wow.
Sounds vaguely familiar to what we've heard in the past couple of years.
It does. Sounds like we haven't really changed much.
But inoculation was not his idea. Okay. History books got it wrong. The honor of introducing inoculation to the colonies goes to a slave named Onesimus. Onesimus was not publicly credited for his role in saving countless lives and was subsequently omitted from medical histories for centuries. Don't believe me? Centuries, you say? Well, in 1932, during a speech to the Massachusetts Medical Society, Dr. Woodward, co-founder of the American Psychiatric Association, said that the idea of variolation, quote, came then from Cotton Mather and came from Cotton Mather only, end quote. Okay. It was only through Mather's own diary that we know the truth, where he wrote, quote, he told me that he had undergone the operation which had given something of the smallpox and would forever preserve him from it, adding that was often used in West Africa, end quote.
Okay.
So Mather then confirmed this with a few other slaves. This whole inoculation process was a thing for real. They confirmed. Then he read up on it, similar methods being used in Turkey. And then he was off saving lives and taking all the credit. Yeah. Side note, variolation treatments were also active in Turkey, China, and India by 1721. And Great Britain learned of the medical therapy from Turkey. So I imagine there are several Africans with this indigenous knowledge that have gone unacknowledged. for their critical contribution to sharing medical treatments with the world.
Right. Indigenous knowledge from Africa. Right.
You got it.
Yeah.
So Onesimus's knowledge of smallpox treatments led to one of the first known inoculation campaigns in American history. And I can only imagine that racism is at the core of why more people don't know his name today. The PBS article that I'm mainly sourcing this from mentioned something that I did not know, but it is interesting. In contrast to math and reading, there are no nationally agreed upon standards for teaching social studies in United States history. That means that every state teaches the history of slavery differently. And what public schools, school students do learn is largely influenced by where they grow up. I did not know that. According to Professor Roberts, a historian at Yale University who researches medicine and slavery in the Atlantic world, said one of the things I hear frequently from undergraduate students is that they feel lied to. They want to know why they didn't learn about this history earlier and the different influences and people who contributed to science. Again, I think the answer is racism.
Yeah,
and it's bolstered by an underfunded K-12 system.
Yeah.
And in fact, the Southern Poverty Law Center examined 12 widely used U.S. history books and surveyed nearly 2,000 history teachers and 1,000 high school seniors, 12th graders, for those wondering that aren't familiar with K-12, and found
give the age for people who are who are not
17 years old, 18 years old.
From like 14 to is what we're talking about. Well, K5 to 17 or 18.
Yeah.
What we're talking about.
So the later stages of that, right? So by the time they're done with this, they still don't get it. And
right.
After surveying all those folks, they found and evaluating the books, they found that an 800-page textbook devoted 20 pages to slavery in the context of a backward economic model and why we had a civil war. And that's appalling, given its gravity, foundations to the country, and reverberating effects we're still experiencing today. Yeah, man, to chalk it up to an alternative means of production just seems disingenuous. So I'll say this, it's not new. Our teachers are unequipped to inform our students, fund the research and development and administration of our schools. And I'll close by saying that there are no images or monuments of Onesimus that exist in public record. So let the story be known far and wide by telling someone this holiday season what you heard today. You can cite the PBS article and some other sources that we'll include in the description of this YouTube episode. And you can certainly share this episode with them. But that is the story of Onesimus. Remember that name, Onesimus.
That's cool. It's very cool. It's a very cool story. None of this is surprising, but it's a very cool story nonetheless.
Have you heard about this at all before?
No, I didn't know about it. No.
Because actually, when I started Googling it, it was like plastered everywhere. And I was like, oh, is this something that I just have not been exposed to before? But I still, the fact that PBS did a whole thing on it this year led me to think that maybe it isn't so well known. No,
I doubt it is. It's surprising that the man left these notes in his diary. He must have thought, I can't even, I'm trying to think of what he must, I'm trying to frame it to think of how his racist brain was basically categorizing this, because he knew that even leaving it in, he would get all the credit. So he must have just sort of said that he
couldn't imagine that anyone would have given.
Basically, credit. I think that's what it was. That's why he left it in, because you're absolutely right. There was no world that he thought that someone would give a slave credit for the stuff that he's bringing to light. You're right. Yeah, no way.
And it also speaks to, last year, one of the things that we covered in the Native American episode and its influence on this country was around its influence on the founding fathers and their engagements and the ideals that were bestowed into our systems and documentation.
Independence.
But it went beyond that. It went
freedom,
into medicine and everything. Like you think of, not you, but we as a people, right, looked at indigenous peoples as being less than, and therefore everything that their culture brought with them was always inferior, when in many cases it wasn't. And even to the people of the day, they were finding this out. And it's just through systemic racism, bias, underfunded education, maybe intentional, that, the stigmas carried through. I mean, it's one thing to you come ashore and you meet a new peoples and you're like, oh, these people are less than, right? But then you find out that they are advanced in certain ways and you borrow from them and it works and it saves you en masse, like inoculating against a virus.
Yeah.
But then you still propagate that going forward. Nothing is done to stop it.
Yeah, racism has a duality. You know, it's complex, but the duality existed. The duality existed at the time. I mean, like you said, we talked about how Benjamin Franklin, Jefferson, you know, they all lauded the freedom and the independence of the Native American, you know, what the or the Indian is what they would have used in terms of their writings. But at the same time, we're quite fine with oppressing them, killing them, and stealing from them at the same, you know, all at the same time. That duality also exists in slavery. There's lots of writings where slave masters themselves, like the Southerners, would talk about how not industrious, not even dexterous, you know, basically just how fine a craftsman many of these slaves were in terms of whatever they were doing. And the thing is, there are tons of accounts of slaves. Either the whole idea of rice, like in the South, that came from Africa. So it was because slaves knew how to farm rice in Africa that we were able to do it in the United States. So that was slaves teaching, you know, basically their masters a new crop that they could then sell. And it's in some you know, in a you know, perverse world. But there's a lot of that. My point is there's lots of that going on where on one hand people are like, wow, there's just so amazing and how amazing this is that they're able to do this. And on the other, they're saying they're ignorant, too stupid to live on their own. They must be enslaved. You know, you have to you had to have it both ways. Otherwise, how could you propagate the system that that you want to essentially keep going, right? I mean, it's so funny because we oftentimes try to let the people of that time go with they didn't know any better. But if you read their writings, and you actually, which is not in our history books, but if you actually read their letters, their writings, the things they're saying between each other, they knew better. They knew a lot better than they were letting on, sort of like in a public sphere, or if you look at the way in which our legislation was curated, you know, in terms of the way that we're treating everybody, they knew better. They knew it was wrong. They chose to do it anyway because money, profits outweighed morality. But to go about saying that they just didn't know any better, it was an old time, is just it wasn't that old. That's the other thing. It wasn't that old. It was 1700s. People had books you could write. You know, we had, you know, Benjamin Franklin's inventing electricity. I mean, not invented, but you know what I'm saying, like it. They were not simpletons. They were very educated people who were running the country. Some of the brightest minds in the world. They knew what they were doing. They knew they knew the duress they were inflicting upon their fellow man, and they did it anyway because profits outweighed their morality, and that's just the end of it. But you can't scapegoat. You can't just say that that whole argument about it was the times and everyone was doing it is just it's such nonsense, because they knew what they were doing.
Well, it was already falling. Now you correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it already falling out of fashion in the rest of the world at the time? So the whole argument that it was.
Well, I mean, America kept it going longer than most other states. There's various reasons for why other, you know, countries did not keep it going. And again, I don't want to make this episode about slavery, but just short answer is that we didn't keep it going as long as Brazil, as long as the Portuguese. I think theirs ended in like 1888. It was almost like 1900. You know, I think the Wright brothers were inventing planes by the time slaves were free in Brazil. But yeah, I'm just saying that it went on far longer. Yeah, you're right, in the Americas than it should have. But again, like, without going too much into it, it's because those who had outlawed it at their own home countries were still funding it in the Americas and still profiting from it in the Americas. That's also part of why it lasted so long over here.
Well, I thought it was an interesting article.
It's a very interesting article. It's very interesting article.
If anyone has any comments or questions, or we got something wrong, or you want to add, or even recommend a topic, just let us know in the comment section.
Yeah.
I do have a lighter one to end on.
Yeah, let's end on that. Yeah. What's a lighter one?
All right. Antoine, if you could, would you choose to live forever?
No. You know why? You know I wouldn't.
Why won't you?
I won't, because I know how. I know that the spice of life is in its in its finality. It's the fact that it's finite that makes it exciting. Once you take that away, it becomes incredibly rote and boring.
You could
And I
still
know
be
that.
killed. You could still be killed.
Oh, I don't. So what's living forever then? What, just that I will never die based
Your
on
body
my
won't
genes?
wither.
My body won't wither. I don't know. I I feel there's just so much. There will be other. Here's the problem with that.
You'll be Antoine right now forever, unless some harm.
Well, I mean, I don't age at all. I never get older.
Nope, just like now.
You tell this story, and then I'll come back to why that's ridiculous.
So it's intriguing, at least.
It's interesting. I want to hear more. But
all right,
yeah.
So, folks, you let us know. You let us know in the comment section what you guys think as well. So sci-fi's dealt with immortality in different ways. Altered Carbon's The Stack, Battlestar Galactica's Resurrection. We've gone over those on the pod before. Real people have looked for immortality throughout history, most famously the Fountain of Youth, literally. Maybe less famously, ingesting a mercury-laced potion. But now we have what ancient kings and emperors didn't: science and oligarchs. Jeff Bezos is starting up Altos Labs with former chief scientific officer of GlaxoSmithKline, Hal Barron. Together, they are setting out to unlock the formula to anti-aging, not to be confused with Darkseid's anti-life equation. This is definitely the opposite. Don't confuse it with anti-life. Jeff Bezos is not Darkseid. The company has billions in funding already, a board of directors brimming with Nobel laureates. The science behind why we age is pretty fascinating, actually. Diminishing cell division, modified genetic expression over time due to chemical exposure. Another fascinating question: why do we age? They don't know yet, but some theories are it's a simple side effect of damaged cells, all the way to it's a defense to prevent cancer from forming by killing off damaged cells. So it's actually this really fascinating thing that they think takes place for reason. So, Antoine, as interesting as the science stuff is, let's get back to what really matters.
Yeah.
Thanks to our billionaire messiah, he has arrived.
Okay.
In the competition among the elite to be remembered, this might be the thing. Right? You have everyone doing their big projects. Mars, EVs, Twitter. I don't think it's going to be any of them. If someone figures out how not to age, I think that's going to be it. And plus, it's going to be hard to forget them when they're still alive. So, why not celebrate him? What could go wrong if he does this?
Mm-hmm.
Would you celebrate him? And what can go wrong?
No.
Should this research be discouraged?
No.
Even if the outcome
should be
belongs
outlawed
to a corporation?
It should be outlawed. If we had any sense as a population, as a people, and the philosophy behind this, we do not want to live forever. There's a reason we don't, and it's not divinely.
What gives you the right to choose that for everyone?
You know what? It's you're right. I think if he creates it, and first of all, I don't know what the price tag will be on such a thing. I mean, obviously he'll get it for free, so this is great. The oligarch billionaires will live forever. This is a fantastic future we're already heading towards. Great. I'm sure they'll freely give this to everyone else who seeks it. I'm sure they won't hoard it for themselves. Not at all. Why would you do that? As they just accumulate wealth for generations upon generations with no way of being stopped. There's just no reason to live forever. There really isn't. There's just not enough to see.
Space colonization, exploration.
I mean, if you could suffer the mental fortitude, the mental duress of sitting in an arc for 2,000 years while you're trying to get to some like the next nearest star or something, I guess that's a fantastic way of
we sat in our homes for 2 years.
Yeah, look how well that's turned out. It's like there aren't enough therapists in the world to basically take the amount of people seeking them. No, it's insane. I mean, first, yeah. I mean, I think you would go insane anyway if you were to try that. I mean, it's a good horror movie. Basically, one person would just wake up and murder all thousands of other sleeping people, just out of some sort of psychosis. There's just no reason for it. I can't see a reason for it. So
you don't think mentally we would be able to take it? That's what you think? I
don't think mentally we'd be able to take the travel of nothingness.
Well, what if they built a glorious Death Star sized ship where it was basically like living on a traveling planet?
Then what's the point of that? Yeah, but then what the
Well, the point of it would be that
you create while on
but
that
you can't stay on Earth because depleted resources, overpopulation, that kind of stuff. You'd need to move on, and you don't want to live on a metal tin can for forever.
You don't know that, because
we talked about this before. Actually, we talked about this before. Actually, remember when we were? Oh man, what was it? I forget what the episode was focused on, but we said that future beings might want to live on a tin can, and they may look at living on a planet similar to how we might look at
that's right
primitive people living in hovels in the dirt and be like, you live on a dirty rock.
That I forgot about. I wish I could recall the episode, but yes, that was a really good episode. It was basically hypothesizing what it would be like. You're right. I think after thousands of years of living in a tin can, you're going to be like, I have everything I could ever want up here. Why on earth would I resettle on a planet that can be destroyed at any moment when I can live on a moving, dodging object and I live forever? So I think this is the best chance at continuing to live forever is to stay. Plus, people will get power. They'll have their own legislative governments. They'll have their own businesses. Why would you give up all that? Because it's going to be thousands of years. You're going to accumulate a lot of wealth. Why would you sacrifice that to start all over on a desolated rock somewhere that's not even as good as the earth you came from? I mean, come on. Like I said, there's so many things, there's so many pitfalls to this that I just don't think it's worth it. I think that as a race, as humanity, we might be.
I mean, people can hand down their wealth to the next generation now. So in terms of solidifying power, what's the difference?
Because you wouldn't be handing down wealth to generations. There's nothing taxable. You just keep having children who keep living as long as you're living. You just continue to solidify. It would basically be like the Medicis?
Yeah,
right in Italy, that family that just basically ruled everything. That's essentially what you're going to get. If those guys going to live forever, they'd still be in power.
So, are there any protections that could be enacted to make this a good thing?
None, because any protections you enact would eventually be taken down over thousands of years with these oligarchs continuing to consolidate their power. So, no. The answer is no.
Antoine does not want to take Jeff Bezos's pill to live forever.
You won't give it to me. I'm long dead before Bezos would take the pill himself as a test subject, and then the next time the pill is offered just happens to coincide with one of his offspring also being old enough to take that pill, and it wouldn't be offered again until somehow that offspring has another offspring. That would be the coincidental cyclical cycle of being able to take these pills.
You just kind of brought up something interesting. I wonder if you were to take an anti-aging pill, if it would somehow normalize within your body to understand your optimal place, or the minute you start taking it, it freezes you in time.
It depends. Yeah, it depends on the drug. Depends on how it's being. Yeah, it really depends on the drug. I don't think there's something we can theorize about what.
It's like being a vampire. It's like whenever you turn into a vampire. That's.
I imagine you couldn't stop it completely, no matter what drug. I can't see a point where science can stop it completely. What I can see is reversing. Well, first of all, there was I don't know if this is the same guy, but I actually did earmark. There was like a CNBC report of a guy who reversed glaucoma in mice. Is this a similar guy? Is this the same guy?
That did not come up.
Okay. What that guy's drug does in terms of his anti-aging is that it starts to reverse the effects of aging. Now, how far back can it reverse? I don't know. I don't know the extent of it. But in that
they've done stuff like in earthworm, and I think it was earthworms or some type of worm where they express the gene differently that tells the body to age. Because that's how it works.
Right.
Other than like physical trauma, your body's being directed to do something.
Right. They did that.
So they did that. And the animal, the worm, if I'm remembering correctly, lives something like 7 times longer or 10 times longer. And when they extended that to humans would live to be like 700 years old or something like that.
Yeah, right. If they
but it's not the same. But if it did work the same.
No, if it did work the same.
So you could just express something differently. Like one of the ways that I said, why do we age is, or how do we age, right? Was that the question? Is diminishing cell division. So when you're younger, your cell's dividing so many times before it dies. And the number of times it will divide before it dies lessens as you get older, from middle of your life all the way to the end of your life. And so you would stop that from happening. You would stop it from diminishing. You would re-instruct your genes to not do that.
I just feel at a certain point, though, there has to be diminishing returns. So, like you said, if it's 700 years, then that's like where you're able to extend it out.
And then you take a stem cell bath, and you're good. And you start it all over.
Yeah, sure. A milk blood bath of the infants of your now vanquished foes. However, our society decides what's moral, because that's the other problem.
It has to be one of your children, because it just needs to be a similar DNA.
All I'm saying is that once we start living beyond first of all, living longer in general has already shaped our moral scope. It's shaped what we believe are right. For instance, like what that's the thing that remember everyone came out against with Game of Thrones.
Where are you going with this? You saying that people who died in their 30s or whatever had a better outlook on life?
No, I'm saying that it shapes what you think is right and wrong. For instance, when you were dying in your 40s and 50s, what do you call it? Not wedding, betrothing a 10-year-old girl to a 22-year-old man was it something that you were like, oh, we can't do that? It was like, oh, that's of course you're going to do that. It's like the girl's 10. she's had half her life. Of course she has to marry, right? That's what I'm saying. It changes your morality. It changes.
Yeah, but all you're saying is living longer is better.
I'm saying that in that particular instance, sure, but there could be other. My point is there could be other unforeseen.
Just none come to mind.
Not at the moment. No, not at the moment.
At the moment, this actually sounds like the best possible outcome.
Yeah. Look, at the moment, we do not marry 10-year-olds to 20-year-olds anymore. But it was a thing we once did. So there could be other things. There could be a backlash to it. That's all I'm going to put out there. There could be a backlash to it. So,
all right. You heard it here. Antoine does not want to live forever.
I don't want to see that world. I don't want to see that future. So, but yeah, you got me on that.
All right.
Where can they find us, Jamie?
Folks, you can find us. Well, you can find us in a few places. Subscribe, like, share, and comment on YouTube at Retraction Media. Follow us on Twitter at Retraction Media. Subscribe to Retraction Podcast on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and more. And it's the giving season. Share the gift of Retraction Podcast with someone today.
I love it. This has been episode 97 on the road to 100. Only 3 more. And that note, Retraction out.